Okay, welcome back everybody. This time we're up for our open briefing on our local elections 2025. So I'm going to hand over to Jack and let you introduce it.
Well, kia ora koutou, Mayor Baker and councillors. Today we're going to be briefing you on the process matters for the 2025 local elections. This is an open briefing just to ensure that all potential candidates have access to the exact same information. We can take questions going through, but just be aware that your question may be addressed on a following slide. Just introducing a few key people. First of all, we have Warwick Lamp, who is the electoral officer for Porirua City Council, and I'll let Warwick introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and meet everyone and have a bit of chat about the elections and election protocols and things that are happening. Jack will go through a few things, a few changes since last time. Some of you may already know me. Of course, I was the electoral officer here at Porirua from 2001 to 2016. Little known fact that Porirua was the first council to contract out its electoral officer role in 2001 of all the councils in New Zealand. So in my case, I've been around the block a bit. Been doing elections since 1986. And so I think at a quick count, I'm probably up to about over 800 council elections or by-elections during that time. So the things that I'll talk about today and that Jack and I will talk about are things that are all part of the normal process and the same way that I deal with all the councils that we work with. I'm electoral officer for 27 councils. Our company, elections.com, based in Christchurch, looks after 45 councils. Same things that I talk about here are the same things that I talk about in all of our other councils. We're a small team of 10 based in Christchurch. I live in Tauranga, live and work remotely, and we do all the councils basically Tauranga South pretty much. Okay, thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Warwick. The other key people to know about in this election are myself. I'm the Deputy Electoral Officer for Council, so I'll be supporting Warwick in his role, and I'll also be the key point of contact for candidates during the stand and vote periods. Wendy Walker, our Chief Executive, of course, has a statutory responsibility for facilitating and fostering representative and substantial elective participation in elections and polls held under the Local Electoral Act 2001, aka promoting the elections and engagement with the elections. Angela Singh in the Democracy Services team is leading the engagement function, so you'll see her and the team out at several events across the city. So, key election dates for you to know. So we'll run through the changes to the timetable since 2022 on the following slides, but just to draw out some of the very key dates. So nominations open on the 4th of July, pre-election period starts on the 11th of July, nominations close at 12 noon sharp on the 1st of August, not 12:01. Voting opens on the 9th of September with delivery of voting documents being completed by the 22nd of September, and then voting closes at 12 noon on Saturday the 11th of October. So in terms of election promotions, we're trying to reach new demographics this election. Based upon analysis that was done, we've identified areas that are less likely to vote in the city, and we'll be focusing on reaching these areas. We'll be increasing the number of ballot bins across the city, hopefully having around 29 in community locations across the city, just depending on who's willing to take one. Candidate videos will be back again to assist voters and give candidates an opportunity to tell voters in 1 minute or less why they should vote for them. The pre-election report will be published on the 18th of July as legally required. We're working very closely with the Electoral Commission to encourage new enrolments, including the Electoral Commission coming to several events, including the citizenship on Monday night, which was awesome. And with the change in election services providers, we now have access to some new technology, meaning we can potentially issue special votes in different locations and around the city. So watch this space, to be confirmed right now, but yeah, hopefully. And also one of our goals is to make this election much more accessible with information in a range of languages spoken in our community and accessible formats as well. And as you will have seen, the elections team is already attending many events across the city, and that's some of the team out at Waitangi Day in Te Raupraha Park. We handed out about 250 sausages to people and had a lot of conversations over the whole day about elections and voting, making sure people were enrolled to vote. So yeah, it's really lovely. Anyway,
You're in your element.
yeah, it was great. It's good. Democracy sausages, you know. So as mentioned in the report, there have been several changes, both legislation and process-wise, since the 2022 local elections, and we're just going to take you through those now. So the 2024 Amendment Act included changes to the election timetable, mainly to provide a longer timeframe for voting documents to be delivered, due to New Zealand Post indicating they had quite a bit of pressure with the 5-day window previously. So they now have 14 days to deliver votes, and as a result, the voting period is 32 and a half days instead of 22 and a half days.
Yeah, I think I can trip in now. I think, it's fair to say we all know that the postal system is degraded a lot. And so there's been a lot of chatter about that and how the 22 days was just too short. Because, it takes a while to get the voter packs out there, and it's just sometimes too short to get them back, particularly if you're overseas. So there's a lot of work done on that with the postal providers. So now we're at 32 days, but with a 14-day delivery period. So that means that the voting packs will start to be delivered on the first day, but will take a couple of weeks to get out there after that, and then 3 weeks after that, basically the voting period for when people need to get it back by.
Also, just to go back slightly to our election promotion, we will be engaging with all four marae in our city, Harota, Hongaweka, Takapuahia and Marairoa, and we'll be talking to their marae committees very shortly, and hopefully we'll have a ballot box in all four of our marae. The last point there, the Māori electoral option, there was a change to the Electoral Act in 2023, which allowed voters of Māori descent to change whichever role they were on up until 3 months before a local or central government election, instead of every 6 years previously, which means that up until the 10th of July, voters of Māori descent can change between the general and Māori roles. We had quite a few people last time who were not aware of what role they were on, and so when they got their voting papers, they were questioning why they had a particular ward on them. Cool.
What that does mean, though, is that after the 10th of July, you can't change, so it is what it is at that point. So that's why it's important to get the word out there and do some promotion beforehand to make sure that everyone's up to speed on that ability to change.
Yeah, that's one of our key messages that we're promoting right now is check which role you're on. Are you enrolled? Yeah. In terms of process changes, just running very quickly through these. So DX Mail has entered into the vote delivery market, and councils around the country have utilised them for vote delivery and been very happy with them. So we're exploring that right now. Special votes can be processed faster, potentially leading to quicker results. Basically, the Electoral Commission will scrape data and give it to Warwick more frequently.
Yeah, what happens is that now the Electoral Commission, after the final roll has been produced, they are now able to send us what they call the supplementary roll, which is people who have newly enrolled or changed their address after the final roll on the 1st of August, but before voting closes. So we can get that during the voting period, which means that it's much faster for us to check special votes that come in over the voting period, because at the moment we have to get those special votes and send them to the Electoral Commission to check, and we always used to have to wait for them to verify those and come back to us and say, yep, these ones are good, these ones aren't. So we can do much of that process ourselves. So in the recent election we did at Tauranga City Council last year, we did this for the first time, and it meant that we could produce the final result 2 or 3 days after voting had closed, which was earlier than what we'd done before. So assuming that works okay this time, then we'll be in the same boat, and we may well be able to produce that result on the Wednesday after election day. So that'll help all round.
Very good. Next up, as you know, there is no election for the Mana Charitable Trust this time round, as they're following a direct appointments process. Then Wellington Regional Council have established a Māori constituency for the first time this election. Telephone dictation voting is quite an exciting entry into the legislative space as well. So electors who are blind, visually impaired or have a physical disability and can't complete their vote unassisted can now vote via telephone. And this will be centrally handled by Warwick and his team to ensure consistency across the country. There are minor technical changes for recounts and ties. And then finally, as you'll be aware, both Porirua City Council and the Wellington Regional Council will be holding a Māori ward poll alongside this election.
With the change in provider, we do things a little bit differently as well. And a couple of things there are for affiliations. You'll be aware that candidates can have an affiliation next to their name on the voting papers. My approach to that is that you can pretty much have whatever you like in that space. I allow affiliations that are taglines or slogans or sayings or whatever you might want, rather than just a party political name or an official affiliation. Yep, I've got some questions on that, sure. Yep.
How do you identify who the person is who's phoning?
Good question. We have a verification process where we, when someone rings up, we verify who they are on the roll and ask them a set of questions to determine whether they fit into that particular qualification. But it is what it is, and that process happens as it happens.
Josh.
Thank you. Very quick question around the Māori ward polls. Given that we're going to be having voters voting in two separate Māori ward polls in this election, are we taking steps to ensure there's standardised wording in terms of what those questions are going to be to avoid confusion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wording's being worked on at the moment. I think it is I vote to keep the Māori ward, or I vote to remove the Māori ward in both cases.
Okay.
And that's just going through the approval process with the Chief of the Department of Internal Affairs, who approves the voting formats and the wording, but that's the current plan.
Jeff?
We're just going to have to step back to the telephone dictation voting, Madam Warwick. Sorry. Yeah, it was just a little bit vague in terms of how to assess, from your point of view, should there be a challenge, especially if there was a close election, with regards to the ability of you as returning officer to confirm the veracity of the individuals who are voting. Without breaking the rules around being a blind ballot, do you record the conversations with these individual voters?
Yes.
So those are held should there be a challenge. Okay, well, that solves that problem for me. I've got plenty of questions, but I'm going to wait to the end.
Okay.
Just one other thing. When we produce our STV result, we produce a full STV iteration report that I can flick you what we did in 2016, which may will be on your website, which gives the full flow of STV preferences between each of the iterations. That's standard practice for what we do, so you'll get to see all that when it comes to both the progress, the prelim and the final result, so you can see how those votes flow.
Very good. So next up with election processes, I will hand over to Warwick as the expert here.
Sure. Okay, most of you will know all of this, and as Josh has mentioned there before, 2 Māori polls on the voting papers, the general wards, Māori ward for both Porirua and for the regional council. So 2 polls. They will be grouped together because they're FPP whereas everything else is STV. And there will be wording in the candidate profile booklet explaining those polls, as well as council doing a comms campaign around that. But yeah, there'll be information in that booklet that tells people about the differences between the two and what it all means. So nominations, I won't go through all this in detail. You guys will know about all this. Of course, you've got to be a New Zealand citizen, got to be a parliamentary elector on the roll, and you've got to have two people nominate you in the area in which you're standing, but you don't have to live in the area with which you stand. You live in Auckland and stand in Porirua if you wanted to. But yeah, those are the rules. No dramas there. Remembering though that at the top of your candidate profile statement it has this sentence that says my principal place of residence is within or not within the area. Everything got to be done at the same time. The usual deal with the Auditor General that if you've got a contract with council for more than 25k, precludes you from being candidate unless you get prior approval from the Audit Office. And as Jack said, nominations in by 12 noon, 1 August, which is a Friday, not 12:01.
Okay, Mike's got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. You or your spouse cannot have contracts. Now, spouse is a husband or a wife, but the preference these days is not to get married. How do you cover people in de facto relationships?
Yeah. Good question. I'm not an expert on this particular requirement. It's just a case of being practical and we'll sort it out at the time. Yeah, it's more from a candidate perspective that if you think that there's that you run into this particular scenario, then you've got to get approval to do so. With the, just go back a second there, Jack. With the
So my girlfriend's all right then to have it.
Just like to remind you you're online and your wife's listening.
Probably not, I would suggest.
Sorry, sensible.
I couldn't possibly comment. The 12 noon cutoff. So use a reminder. Please do not leave putting your nomination documents till the last minute, because if you do and we don't have time to get it fixed by 12 noon, then too late. But if you are emailing your nomination, remember that it's the time that it's received into council's inbox, not the time that you send it. We all know that when you send an email, there's cybersecurity and the way the world works. It takes a few minutes for an email to get there. If someone was to email at 11:59, it probably may not get to the council until 12:01, which is too late. It's got to be in our hands at 11:59:59, not 12:01. 12:00:01. So bear that in mind if anybody is emailing their nomination documents at the last minute. Has caused some issues recently where people have been caught out by that. Okay.
How do you make that an option?
No, it's just a case of making it as easy as possible for people to submit their nomination documents, and most people do it electronically. We're probably about 85-90% of people do it by email. Sure, you can come in, same deal. If you come into the council office, you've got to be in the door of the building at 12:00:00 when the pips go on the national program on the radio. If you're not in the door, your nomination can't be received. Same deal in the digital space. That make sense?
And can I just remind you, if you're asking a question, to ask your name and speak into your microphone. The ones online are texting because they didn't hear the question. Thank you.
Apologies.
Okay, candidate profile statements. Most of you know the drill on this. 150 words maximum 150 words, not 151. And we check it religiously. Can be 150 words in English and 150 words in te reo. Substantially the same. We do check this. And if someone did put in some words that are significantly different, then we go back and query that. And English and other languages, but up to a maximum of 150. And of course, passport-sized photo, if in hard copy, but electronically, send us a colour photo. 300 DPI is our preference. Don't rip one off a Facebook page at 72 DPI, because when you do, it'll pixelate when we go to print and it won't look too good. So I'll come back to you and want to replace it. So give me a good quality digital photo, please. But usual deal, no hats, no sunglasses, no parrots, no whānau, no children, nothing else, no slime monsters, yes. Just a photo, head and shoulder shot of yourself, please. All right. Okay, results. Talked a little bit about this before, but usual deal, 3 sets of results, progress results on the day, which won't include the votes that are in the orange bins on the Friday night and the Saturday morning. It's roughly 85 to 90% of all votes received. So progress could change. Back in the day at Porirua, I had a couple of instances where results changed between progress, prelim and final. So, yep, happens all the time when results are close. In my world, when results are close is less than 5. When I'm dealing with results elsewhere, because our system's audited by Deloitte, it's super accurate, but sometimes results change when those margins get close. And I think we had a case here at GW last time where it swapped around between prelim, final, progress of prelim.
We had a case here in the last election.
We did.
Yeah.
Yep, so you're all familiar with that. So progress on the day, prelim the next day, final Thursday, may well be the Wednesday if we can get those specials validated before then, so that once you got the final result, you can schedule your inaugural meeting earlier and away you go. Okay, any questions on that?
No.
Good. Donations and expenses, same deal. Remember, Jack said in the timetable before the pre-election period, 11th of July to the 11th of October is the period for which candidates have to record their candidate expenses, and also kicks in the election protocols. We'll talk a bit about them shortly. But donations, there's no time period, so you have to record all donations that you've received on your campaign, even if you got it last year, if it was for your campaign. A few rules around donations. They are a bit tricky. They're set out in the candidate handbook, and we'll talk about that closer to the time. But, moral of the story is keep records of all your donations and expenses. When you put in an expense return, we don't need the receipts. We just want the list of what the expenses are, because that then has to go up on council's website for 7 years. Legal requirement. Yeah.
So are those council expenses tax deductible?
I'm not an expert on tax advice, so I couldn't possibly comment.
And I did have Kylie listed first. So Kylie.
Would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Because it's I'm being serious. Oh, next one. That's the one. I have some issues, Warwick.
Sure.
The first thing I'd like to know is how do you get to that formula for 7,000 for the Porirua Māori ward?
Okay.
And before you answer your question, I'd just like to give some background as to why I'm asking this question. The first is, I know you're going to talk about numbers and on the roll and through the city and all that kind of thing. However, The Porirua Māori ward is a city-wide ward. It doesn't belong to one ward. So it actually covers quite a large part of the city. The second thing is, as well, is that I think the expense limit for somebody, not me, but if someone else wants to run in the Māori ward, that expense limit is quite ridiculous. If nobody knows who this person is and they're wanting to put a billboard up, which is $7,000, they have no money to do anything else. For a council who sounds like we're going to be going out and trying to work the people that are less likely to vote, you would think the Porirua Māori ward would be at the top of that list. Please tell me why we can't change that number. And in the last 3 years, because this was the same in 2022, things increase in price. Resources, production costs,
Yes.
aids.
Yes. Good question.
I hope you got a good answer.
So do I. Where to start? So these numbers are set in legislation based on the population of the particular area. And these numbers have been in place since 2001 and haven't changed during that time. Take your point that inflation has occurred since then, the price of everything's gone up. These numbers haven't changed. So legislative requirement, we haven't got any say over that. Nor do we have any say over how that limit is determined, because it's simply set in the legislation, in a schedule in the legislation, and it is what it is. And so the issue with the Māori ward is that it is based on the population of the Māori ward, Māori role, and that population puts it into that bracket, and it just is what it is, and it can't change.
Yeah, I've heard you say that a few times today. But the population, when they started the legislation in 2001, there was no Māori ward.
Exactly. Yep. Correct.
So how have we just picked that out, considering it wasn't factored into the 2001 legislation?
Yep. It wasn't in 2001 legislation, nor was inflation as high as it was an issue back then. But it can't be changed unless the legislation changes. So legislation change, requires process through Parliament, and that's where it's at.
So can somebody else say, I'm supporting such and such? They're not giving the person money. They're running a separate campaign to the side saying, I'm supporting this person, I'd like you to. Because it's the only way around this. Is that legal?
You mean a third party?
A third party being whoever, not a councillor at the table, but Joe Public say, actually, I can see that this person is struggling. I want you to vote for her because she can't actually do it within the money.
Yeah. Good question. Shades of grey is the answer to that. This does get into a tricky space, but this has happened before in other elections. In fact, I'll use the example of Nick Leggett when he stood for the Wellington mayoralty. There's an expense limit involved in that. And in that particular case, there was a third party who put up a really large billboard in Wellington City supporting Nick. You may remember this.
Yep.
So that was a third party person not aligned with Nick, not involved by Nick, nothing to do with his campaign, complete third party, standalone, no problem. Absolutely, that's legal and possible and no problems to do that. So the issue with that is that if someone does that, it has to be completely separate from the campaign that the candidate does, to the point that the candidate doesn't know about it. Because if the candidate does know about it and has some links into that, then there can be a complaint around that, and that can go down the prosecution path or the complaint path with the police. And that's not a place that we all want to be. So, simple, yes, provided it is completely separate from what the candidate is doing without their knowledge.
So can I follow that with a second question?
Sure.
So what about if someone, say Ngāti Taua supported one candidate, could they do that compared, the person doesn't know within the iwi? Just as an example, because Yeah.
So, yeah, any third
Yeah.
party. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kylie.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you for answering my very contentious question. I just hope with the inequity and how much you're allowed to spend that it doesn't put people off wanting to run.
Yeah, fair comment. I think though that it is something that does need to be raised in Parliament, as it were. Through your MP or whatever process you might go through to get the legislation looked at. Because you're right, it is an inequity and it's causing some issues.
I've got Jeff, then Josh.
As to that point, Warwick, you've been, as you say, involved in a lot of elections over multiple decades.
Yes.
And you have appeared at Parliament as well to speak on
Yes.
issues relating to legislation and the conduct of elections in local government. Have you ever taken opportunity to highlight this inequity with regards to the both the inequities from a geographical and a cost price pressure, inflationary creep issue on campaign limits, noting for the satisfaction of Councillor Weehappy and perhaps everybody else, $1 in the first quarter of 2001 is worth $1.82 now. So it's almost half the power, or double. These limits should be doubled what they are if we were going to keep them in parity with 2001.
You're correct. I have been in front of the Select Committee a number of times over recent years. I think this issue was discussed at after the last election when we did go to the Select Committee, along with a whole lot of other things. But it's not front and centre in that space yet. But I think, based on what you're all saying here, it's time to do that. So after the next one, when there is a parliamentary review, then, let's make sure we all put it on the radar to be raised at that point.
Josh?
Yeah, two quick questions in relation to this. One, is this particular issue something that we know if it's on LGNZ's radar? If there's been any indication that this is something that there is collective
Not
concern
expense
about
limits,
across?
I'm aware of, no.
No, okay. Because that would seem like the natural
Yeah.
forum to go through
Correct.
to resolve something like this, because it does seem like I had not realised it had been 20 plus years since that adjustment had been made. The second was, what's the implication for someone, let's say you've got a candidate who runs to the Porirua Māori ward and also mayor, you've got quite a different spending limit. What happens if that candidate wants to put up billboards that say, vote this person for mayor and the Porirua Māori ward? What happens in terms of apportionment of expenses there? Is that possible?
When you stand for two
Yeah.
positions, the higher limit applies.
Okay. So
So,
Yeah.
so you put two
So
and two
it just
together,
sets it
you get
there.
4.
yeah, so if you're running for the Porirua Māori ward and you want to spend more than $7,000, just run for mayor as well.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Right.
Taku?
Just a short question. Do you get the same sort of responses to the unfairness of those numbers from other Māori communities or councils?
It does come up from time to time, but I haven't had as strong a debate about it as here yet.
Truly?
The one debate I do have is a different point, but and I think we should discuss this as well, is the differential in the 150 words in English and the 150 words in Te Reo. That, you all know that the Te Reo is more words than the English, and we do get comment from time to time that it's hard to make the translation from 150 in English to fit into the 150 in Te Reo. So that, we do get that from time to time, and we've raised that at the Select Committee as well. So it's, part of the same thing.
Thank you. Do you want to go back to the two before it?
So we can do that. I think we'd finished that one. So just the next one on donations and expenses.
Yeah.
Pretty self-explanatory.
No great dramas there. As I said before, the expenses returned going to be in by 56 days after the declaration, which is probably going to be 10th to 11th of December, and goes on council website for 7 years. If you don't submit a return, then I will eventually pass it to the police. We will refund the $200 deposit if the candidate is entitled to it once the expense return has been completed. And if you are running on a ticket with a number of other candidates, then you can prorata those costs across those candidates. And of course, the strange anomaly that the cost of the wood holding up your sign is not an election expense, yet the sign writing piece that's on it is.
Are you saying we don't have to put in for the wood? We always have before?
Not the cost of the framing,
Okay.
not an election expense.
Well, that helps. There you go. Colin? Jointly do that.
Just going back to those expenses, the expense limits, those are based on 2022's numbers. I do just need to double check that they still apply, because I've got a feeling that one of the wards might be close to the limit and might have gone over it, which means it would go up to the next bracket. Jack and I will check that when we get the latest population figures from LGC and stats that then go into the Canada handbook after Easter, May.
Josh?
So we'll confirm that.
So does that mean before, I can't remember the exact date, what was it, sometime in July was the cut-off for people switching between wards. So, so hypothetically, if a large number of Māori voters switched from the general ward to the Māori ward, you could see that threshold go up.
No, it's not based on the roll. It's not based on the electoral roll. It's based on the
Numbers
electoral
in that area.
population.
Okay, so the number of voters who are Māori as opposed to which roll they're on, is that how it's calculated?
It's based on the number of people who identify as Māori and whakapapa te Māori of the electorate. So it's GEP versus MEP, so general electoral population versus Māori electoral population, not the electoral roll numbers.
I see.
It's a complex formula that's put out by DIA and Stats that determines those numbers.
All right. And then next up on signs, so just a reminder that all signs on public land must have a permit approved by council. Signs can be put up from midnight on Saturday the 9th of August 2025. And signs must be removed by 11:59 p.m. on Friday the 10th of October 2025, the day before the election.
Is that what your bylaw says?
Yes.
Your hoardings policy?
Yes.
I have a question along this, and then I'll come to you, Jeff. So we have sites in the city where you say you can only do 2 weeks or whatever because the site's so small. How are you going to do that? Is it going to be first in, first served or whatever? And are you going to remove the ones that are still sitting there? We ran into this problem last time and we weren't aware of it, but you guys did it.
Yep. So on the permitting regime, I believe that last election there was a 2-week sharing arrangement going
But
on.
we weren't advised and we didn't get to choose. So what I'm saying is, will the bylaws team say, oh, you're first in, you can have the second week or the first week? Just a stupid question, but could they look at that? Jeff?
We'll check with the bylaws team.
Glad you've raised that. It's another one which is based on experience from the last election campaign. And on an unrelated matter, I actually had to go and check the bylaws with regards to to signage in Porirua that we passed only a short while ago. In that policy, certainly on the website, it says that council holds no responsibility for damage that is taken to signs. In the last election, several candidates, 2 of which I know for certain are at this table, had their signs damaged. They were damaged, and I say this with reluctance because I'm very careful and mindful of our oaths of office, but it was done by council officers. And the explanation for that took some time, but we finally got an explanation for it. Now, that took additional cost and time to have repaired. When it became apparent that, in the case for my story, they were completely legal, both in height from the ground and also in terms of volume. So can I get some assurances from you guys that officers are well aware of the rules for this time, and secondly, that to remove any doubt that council understands that does have liability for signs that are damaged by officers in carrying out the enforcement of the rules?
That is so true. I think Nick's
I'd like an answer to that
Nick's
question.
for reply.
We'll answer that.
Through you, Chair, I do recall that instance. Councillor Hayward, you're right, and I will do my absolute best to ensure that the staff are well aware and that we don't have an incident like that again.
Jeff?
Can officers just be aware that in a very recent history, council officers have been accused by the public of interfering in the electoral process, whether justified or not. So one side of that aisle, I guess. But the point being that any issue like this that comes up reinforces that perception with the public. Can officers just be mindful of that, please?
Yes. She's nodding. Yes. Josh, then Kylie.
Yeah, I was just going to say further to that with the signs issue in particular, it would be really good, and I don't know if the process for this is set by us or not, but where there are situations where candidates have signs up that may have a minor infringement, for there to be an opportunity for the candidate to correct that. And the reason I said, so I had this exact issue last time. I had a number of signs across Whitby that were smashed down, and I use that term smashed down because that's what happened. They broke shattered the posts that they were on, the signs themselves were damaged. I had a number that was smashed down. I went around, I put them back up. They got smashed down again. I went around and put them back up. They got smashed down again. At that point, I reached out to council and I was informed by council, oh yes, we did that. They were 2 centimetres too high. And that took a lot of time and were very expensive to be able to replace those. Now, if someone had just called me up and said, hey, your signs are 2 centimetres too high, I would have gone and dealt with that. So I was able to handle that because luckily I had a bunch of volunteers that were happy to help me. If that hadn't been the case, that would have been a really significant task to be able to deal with, and I think in particular for new candidates. So tightening up that process would be really good.
Well, and it's
Take
total
your points,
nitpicking.
Josh. Yep.
Yeah, and the ground moves when you put a sign in. So, Kylie.
Thanks. There just seems to be with signs a little bit of grey area when signs are placed inside somebody's private property as opposed to on the roadside or on a fence as well. So perhaps later on, it's not a discussion we need to have here, we could get some clarification on that, because I do believe that my nana was very upset when somebody wanted to take my sign out of her window. I'm just using that as an excuse. But there was no clarity around the reasoning behind that. So
Because you were 50 metres from a corner, within the 50 metres from a corner.
well, I would dispute that, but anyway.
The house was. Yep. I know. Believe me, I know. I've run into it. Okay, Jack.
Next up, Warwick.
Yeah. So, usual deal, campaigning. Pretty much with campaigning, anything goes, political environment. But a couple of things, usual rules of defamation apply. So be mindful of that. But that's not an area that I will get involved in. But I will sing out if anybody uses an imitation voting document. So in other words, if you have a sign that has your name and a box and a number 1 next to it, great. If you have a sign that has all of the candidates in your ward and a 1 next to your name and nothing against the others, that looks like an imitation voting paper. So that is against the legislation. So you can have a sign just with your own name and a number in it. Remember, any piece of campaigning material, from the time that you start campaigning has to have that authorisation statement on it. Signs, billboards, flyers, radio adverts, T-shirts, hats, caps, pens, every piece of campaigning material got to have that authorisation on it. And including your social media pages as well.
Yeah. And just to add there, that law change in 2022, just prior to the election, permits the full name and then one of the permitted contact details. So you no longer have to put your full residential address on there. You can put an email address, a web page that contains one of the details, PO box, mobile number. Yeah.
Jeff?
Thanks for that. This may actually be related to expenditure as well. For material that is produced before the date of the, I guess, writ date, for lack of a better phrase, but could plausibly still be in distribution during the period, the authorised period. In regards to the returns, is a prorated calculation permitted in the return?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples about that. For example, if you put a half-page ad in the Dom Post on the 10th of July, one day before the 3-month period, daily paper, outside of 3 months, not included in canned expenses. If you sign write your car now and have it sign written for 6 months, and let's say it costs $1,000, the 3-month period is half of the 6 months that your car is sign written, so 50% of the cost you prorata it because it's when that campaign material is used. So if the campaign item goes across into those 3 months, then that's the time for which you do your prorata. It can get a bit tricky, and if you're unsure about any of that, just give me a call and we can have a chat about it. Key thing here with all of this stuff, just ask me. Just click me an email, give me a call, send me a message. We'll deal with that and put you on the right path.
Cool. Very good.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll just briefly talk about the protocols for elected members standing for re-election in an election year.
Yeah, this is my pet topic at the moment because I work with lots of councils and I've got other councils around the country where there's lots of campaigning that has started. So it's appropriate to raise the issues around elected member protocols. It's traditionally been the 3-month period, 11th July, 11th October, but if there is lots of campaigning underway, then it's appropriate for you all to be aware of these protocols and bear them in mind in your own space. So there is a balance between being an elected member, BAU, and what is campaigning. So I want you to have your hat on as to when are you doing BAU councillor stuff, elected member stuff, and not use those opportunities for campaigning. When you're doing your campaigning, it's okay. It's not as an elected member. So there is a differentiation there that I want you just to think about that and work out what you're doing at any particular time. BAU stuff, so you're going to have access to council information as usual, that carries on, but there will be a little bit of sensitivity around that, particularly during the 3-month period, that if you're asking for information about particular things, then it will likely be made available to all candidates. Can't use council resources for campaigning purposes, like as I've had this week in another council. I don't want you to use your council taken photo that is on the council website for use in your campaigning billboards and posters. Things like that. Quite often during
Yes, we supply them, Ross.
during the 3-month period, councils will stop doing columns from the mayor or councillors in the local paper or radio slots. And not use elected members in photo shoots or being quoted in media releases where the CE would take the place or the leadership team, so that there is a level playing field between being an incumbent and those who are not. So and that's really that, and that's the key thing about all these protocols. It's about making sure that it's a level playing field for the election period, and as I say, if campaigning has started before then, from that time.
Okay, I've got Jeff then, Kathleen.
Thank you. Warwick, why would we not use, by way of contrast, the parliamentary system, which is that their system, the parliamentary service says that it's no material would be considered not a campaign material if it explicitly directs, a reasonable person would be persuaded to vote or donate towards for or against any candidate.
I'm not familiar with those rules because that's a different election, it's a different space. And in our legislation, nothing is set. There's nothing in legislation about it. And so it's just been a case that councils have developed these protocols over time that set this out. I guess they might be based on the parliamentary ones, I'm not sure, but it's a different space somewhat.
I guess the only reason why I make that point is that for the general public who will not see the difference when it comes to an election campaign necessarily in terms of the conduct of individual electors around the use of or being present in council-funded material where they feel, but it may not be to a reasonable person, that is being used to endorse a person for office.
Sure. Well, I guess the same principle applies, and it's principle-based is what this is, so it's, it would make sense that it follows the same deal, but it's different legislation, different election. There's a polling booth, this is postal voting. Enough differences to make the whole thing a little bit different.
Kathleen?
Warwick, I heard you say before around asking for information within that 3 months and that it would probably need to go to all the other candidates. What's an example of something someone would ask for where that would be the case?
Oh, just information requests, normal information requests, or if you were asking about a particular council project and the details of that, then that might be something that would go to everyone. Just depends on the situation.
So, how can you tell when something's more BAU though, and what?
That's something for Jack and Wendy to determine at the time, depending on what the request is.
Right.
But it just means that during that period, be cognizant that if you're asking for information, that it may well go to all candidates, depending on what it is.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a line call, really. If something's being currently considered by the council in an agenda or meeting upcoming, that's probably BAU, whereas if it's not, that's less so. It'll be a discussion between myself and Moana in terms of the normal Lagoima process considerations as well. And so those will be uploaded to the website just in a big list. I think we had 10 or 15 last time requests from candidates all over the place, and it's just making sure that everyone has the exact same information, so no one's privileged, candidate or current elected member or both. Yeah.
Yep.
Next slide.
Yep, excellent. So a couple of things. With your campaigning as an elected member, remember you can't use council resources for doing that. So that means, in practical terms, you can't use your council email address for overt campaigning. So, if you're restanding, you could create a vote for me for mayor page with your own personal email address, and you use that for your campaigning purposes, not your PCC email address. So the key there is to keep your campaigning self separate from your BAU current self. Sometimes hard to do, shades of grey. Now, got to be practical about it. Some people would say that therefore you shouldn't use your council laptop for doing campaigning. At the end of the day, I'm a bit more practical about that. It's on device agnostic. It's about what the person receives for them to determine whether that's as an elected member or whether it's as an individual, not about the device it's sent from. So, you might have a council phone, for example, when someone sends you a question about campaigning, you reply from your council phone, but you'll switch it to come from your personal email address. Doesn't matter the device you send it from. About what is the person receiving is that your campaigning self.
Common sense.
Common sense.
Thank you.
Sometimes hard to find common
Yes, we didn't
sense.
have that previously.
But as I say, if you've got any questions around that, then sing out. If I was to receive any complaints about it, then I'm just going to give you a call and say, look, this is what it is. Be mindful of that. Like, this stuff's protocols. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. It's not set in legislation, but it's protocols to keep all of us safe in that campaigning space and your BAU space. So common sense applies, and we work it out as we go. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Māori ward, a little bit tricky this time. There'll be lots of noise about it, be contentious or not, whatever the case may be. But it'll be political. You can have a position, but if you're spouting forth that position, then that's as an individual. You can't use council resources to promote your position on that, nor council's position on that. Council can't do a vote for Māori ward campaign. It's against the legislation. But as an individual, you can promote your position as you wish.
Kathleen?
Just while we're on the topic of the social media,
Yeah.
we all have social media pages
Yes.
as councillors. Does anything need to change with that, or
So it's a council law page.
no? Like
It's
we-
your own
it's
council
our own
page.
Facebook page, and it's just set up as a councillor.
It's like Kathleen, councillor for Onipota ward. She set it up, it's not council. It's like me saying Mayor Anita Baker, Mayor of Porirua.
Yeah, shades of grey. Gets a bit
Yeah.
messy. If it's a BAU council page that you talk about stuff in your councillor realm all the time, then that's a council page. If you had wanted to do campaigning, I would want you to have a separate campaigning page that's not connected to that.
Sorry,
Unless you switch it to your own personal campaigning page and make that differentiation, and then don't use it for your normal councillor stuff.
so it's not owned by council.
It's not owned by council.
Yeah.
So it's it's shades of grey there, but it's more about how has it been portrayed over the last 3 years. Is it a council page? Is it a councillor page? Or is it your own personal page that you can use for campaigning? Be mindful of that and be careful around that.
Okay.
Tricky, potentially tricky.
Okay. And then nearly at the end here, just a massive plug for our candidate information sessions. So we'll be having our 2 candidate information sessions this year on Saturday the 12th of July from 10 to 11 a.m. and Monday the 14th of July from 7 to 8 p.m. in the Helen Smith Room at Pātaka. At these sessions, prospective candidates can hear from the electoral officer, the chief executive, relevant council officers, for example, the bylaws team, and a former councillor on their experiences being on council. We'll have a New Zealand Sign Language interpreter at both sessions, and one of these sessions will be live streamed so that anyone who can't make it can watch online. I
have got Mike and then Jeff.
Yeah, great having the NZSL interpreter there. Well done on that. That's fantastic. I actually went to this before I became a councillor and found it really helpful. Is it going to be a surprise who the former councillor is, or can we know now?
Haven't spoken to Wendy about it yet, so...
It's to be confirmed.
Yeah.
It's a surprise. Yeah. It's a surprise.
Jeff.
I know we're getting to the end of the slides,
Yep.
and I said I had questions. I'm going to try and keep them compact. You may not be able to give me answers in advance of today. You may have to come back to me with my email. Is that okay?
Yep. Just before you launch into questions, Councillor, can I...
I think we'll do the questions first.
Okay,
And then
cool.
this next one.
Okay. So thank you again for coming in, Warwick. And Jack, as always, you're a bloody ledge. Booths or voting locations. Thank you for the work that you are doing with our tangata whenua with regards to utilising marae as locations for dropping off ballots. There was not a lot of detail on mobile voting booths. can I get an explanation as to why that is the case, and commentary on the likelihood that that will be a measure and to what extent that will be a measure during the election?
Of course. So the level of detail right now is a bit minimal just because we're quite a way out from the voting period, and we're still kind of in the planning stage of this. Haven't contacted all of our ballot box hopeful locations yet, so still have those to be confirmed. The team is exploring the idea of placing a team member and special voting equipment in some of our libraries, particularly Porirua Central Library and Cannons Creek Library. So yeah, we're looking at that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
With regards to mobile special voting booth, this is what some of my other councils do. Effectively, a man in a van, for a better word, where there's a polling booth in a van going around the city on a particular schedule that's advertised in advance that says it'll be at this location at this time, and go from there. That works in other places, and that is something that we're considering here to see if we can put that in place.
A lady and a man in the van.
Right.
Yeah, let's get away from the gender binary kaupapa anyway. Associated question, one of the pieces of feedback...
Sorry, Jeff. Yep.
Associated question, one of the pieces of feedback that I think I gave after the last election was that many people who work in the city but live in Porirua couldn't drop off their ballot on the way to or from work. Has any work been done on trying to get a voting booth installed at Wellington train station, for instance?
Yes. There was a polling booth. There was a orange bin at the Wellington train station last time for some part of the voting period, and that is likely to be the case this time.
So obviously one of the things that will be really important in terms of the voting packs is to make it clear that those options are available and in explicit language so as to assist the voter in that process.
So to help on that, because I'm the election officer at Porirua, Wellington, Hutt, Upper Hutt, Wairarapa,
Look at you.
and everywhere else,
Yeah.
except for Kapiti,
He's not bragging.
all of those voting locations, all orange bins, for want of a better word, all of those votes come back to us, to the same provider, to our office in Christchurch. So anyone can drop any vote back into any of those bins, anywhere, and we will receive them. So that does mean that it gives us more opportunity to promote whereabouts of those, and then anybody can drop it in at the train station or in Wellington, or because Wellington will have 70 odd orange bins. They'll all come back to us, so no problem with that at all.
Okay, Māori electoral option, as I understand the law, it is up to the 3-year period, a 3-month period before the election day.
Month lockout, yep.
And then when does it unlock? The day after the election?
Correct.
Okay, that solves that one quickly. In terms of the work done by council to promote elections, do we utilise the any updates to the role with individuals who have now come into the role who weren't enrolled before in Porirua to encourage them to participate in the election, considering that we know that they have moved recently and it may be a timely option for them to check in with us around the elections that are coming up? Do we do any promotional space in there?
I can't speak for council on that, but the Electoral Commission do a lot of work in that space. And remember, they will do their enrolment update campaign in July that does cover off some of those instances where they know about it. They do data share between agencies to hear from people who move into an area that's new. But council can back that up as well in the comms that it does.
Thanks. In terms of transient voters, those individuals who don't necessarily keep their updated details, do we have data available to make some sort of judgment on how that's looking in the Porirua situation, even at a citywide level?
I'm not aware of anything on that.
No, neither am I. However, the Electoral Commission does take a policy of 2 missed contacts before it places the elector on the dormant roll, and then it's just a matter of them filling in another form to become back on the active roll.
Okay.
And at the same time, those individuals can come and do a special vote during the voting period and enrol.
Yeah.
And then we validate that as part of the electoral commission process.
Ironically enough, that's my last question, and is just around the promotion of enrol and vote for those, because I think that will be a big factor across Porirua, not merely One Poto, and how proactive are we as part of our promotion materials to remind people that they don't have to wait for for the letter to come in their letterbox. They can go down and vote at any point during the voting period. Walk in, check their roll. If they're not on there, enrol and vote.
Yeah, so one of the discussions we actually had yesterday in the team was around not so much labelling our special voting sessions as special voting sessions and actually just voting sessions to make it a bit more inclusive. And as we said, if we're out and around the city issuing votes, we're happy for anyone to come up, even if they've got a special vote at home.
Correct, absolutely.
Just
Yeah.
related to that, it's just I think that officers may want to reflect on the opportunity that arises for the public to make the voting process as similar as it is to the general election campaigns. Warwick, you're quite right. They are a voting day, but they do have an early vote window. And in the last 2 elections, more people voted before election day than before. So in that context, they are analogous to each other in that they have a window where people can participate. If our process looks as close as possible to the general election campaign, which is set locations where the public know where they are, they can go in and vote with a process that is not too laborious compared to general election campaigns. We might be able to look at being proactive in resolving this issue of low voter turnout. Kia ora.
Thank you. That leads to me. I'm going to suggest that we have a second question, a non-binding question, referendum, in our polls. It's on the screen. Should Porirua City Council work with councils in Wellington, the Hutt Valley and the Wellington Regional Council to explore the possibility of creating one single council that combines relevant services and functions regionally while keeping appropriate local services and decision-making local? Yes or no? The reason I want to put this up is I think from a democracy point of view, we should actually hear from our local Porirua residents how they feel on this issue. I get asked all the time. I get residents going, yes, no, but actually no one asks our residents. We all talk around them. They live in our city. What do they actually think of this idea? Because it gets talked about in the media. The second reason I want to put it up is I want to drive up the voter turnout. We have a really poor turnout. I'm hoping a question like this might also drive the turnout. So from my point of view, it's just my idea. I need to know what councillors think, whether you're up for it, whether you're not. I'm saying it's a non-binding poll because I know one other councillor is looking at it. I won't name them online, and looking at the same question. But we talk about this all the time. It's been going on since I sat at this council with Nick Leggett. So this is just a question to see what our residents actually think. So can I open it up for discussion, please? Jeff.
Thank you, Your Worship. Courageous approach there. I want to just double check with officers if there is at this stage some idea of what additional costs it would be to add a non-binding question to the election
Yes, there
materials.
is.
Good question, that. There would be some extra vote processing cost and I guess some information involved in going into the voter pack to explain it. Round numbers, 20K-ish, I guess.
All in 20K, you mean?
Yeah.
And I know that's a very rough estimate because goodness knows we've just had this suggested. So
Yeah, I haven't thought about this in any great detail, but
No, this was me throwing it out and them
Yeah.
giving me a lower estimate than this yesterday. So it's just
I'm mindful that we've just had a bit of a conversation in the formal council meeting about the cost estimates. I won't put you to the same point of the sword that some of my council colleagues had earlier with regards to asbestos removal. But thank you. So as to commentary, again, it is a courageous act, Your Worship. Obviously, no matter what our ratepayers say, it is a collective decision. when was the last time we did a region-wide referendum on this proposal?
Never, and that is my point, because no one can actually agree. The one when Fran went round,
Yes.
that wasn't a referendum. We just went around councils. They didn't send it to a vote to people. No one ever asks our residents the democracy question.
It's a fair point. I guess, as it is with these, generally speaking, with regards to non-binding, which is effectively a referenda, is to what extent does that actually, inform us in terms of what happens next based on that decision? Obviously, if it's a no, then it's effectively status quo and there's nothing to do. So while I'm supportive of wanting to, make this non-binding, certainly, I'm just mindful that in communicating this out as council being neutral, how do we make the point about what does this mean if the answer is yes? Because that's the thing I think the public are going to want to know, well, what does that mean? Because if it means nothing,
Well, it's an
then the
indication.
question then comes back to the $20,000 costs, which is what I'm trying
Yeah,
to say
and
before.
it's an indication to government. They're both sides of government saying you guys need to do it in Wellington. They won't do it to us. So how about the residents tell government what the hell's going on? Because I don't think anyone does. And the other council that is thinking of doing this, yeah. So we've been tugged both sides of government, and once again they're asking us to spend more money on things and nothing happens. And that's red and blue, yellow, green, whatever colour. No one actually wants to put their hand up and help local government. What we're trying to do is help our ratepayers and reduce our costs. But who's doing that? And are we talking to our ratepayers? No. But this is just me.
Yeah. Look, again, I can only reinforce the courageousness of this. We will have to, if we go down this path, we will have to figure out a way to justify the expenditure in terms of getting this meaningful information back from the voters. Bear in mind as well, at the moment, even with improved voter turnout, we are still dealing with a very low base of participation. So can it truly be indicative of a mandate from the public as well in terms of their view? That's all I'm going to say. Kia ora.
Correct. Josh.
Thank you very much. So my position on this, I think, in principle, I'm in favour of the idea of doing this. The things that I would be thinking about, that the potential cost is one of them that Jeff has flagged. In particular, when we're making this, I assume that this would be something that would go up at a council meeting and we would formally vote on it.
I assume, yes.
So I guess signalling, if we were to have that come up at a council meeting, the sorts of things I would be interested in knowing about that would help inform my vote on this would be not only what is the cost, but what is the comparative cost of running an extra question alongside the selection versus doing like a bespoke referendum that is separate. So what is the cost difference there? Ideally, if we were to do something like this, I would like to see a joined up approach on this with the councils across Wellington, asking a question that involves standardised wording across all of those councils. And I think that could give us a really good indication, because we know that we could go and do this and we could overwhelmingly vote one way or the other, but it's almost irrelevant if we don't know what the situation is with the other councils as well, and in particular I'm thinking that the really big players like Wellington. So I guess I'd be interested in knowing to that, what is the time frame we have to make a decision on this? And do we have time to coordinate with other councils, try and agree on some standardised wording, get them to all vote on that at their relevant council meetings? And further to that, would it be simpler to run this through GW than through us, given they already sit across all of them? So I guess those are probably the sorts of things I'm thinking about. I don't know if anyone can speak to any of those now.
Well, yeah, you can, but round the table, obviously one other mayor is taking it to their council.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to be careful what I say, obviously, for other mayors. Warwick.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a surprise to me because I haven't.
We like surprises. We like to lead the nation.
Surprises are good. So, as I say, I haven't thought too much about the cost of it. Sorry, is that working right? If it was a standalone referendum, not combined with the council elections, the usual deal is you take the number of electors on the roll and you multiply it by 4.5. So what, if you have 40,000 electors, you're talking 160, 170, somewhere in that vicinity if it was a standalone poll sending a voter pack or a document to everybody to get them to vote on. All package. If you're combining it, as I said before, 20K would cut it, I would think. Timing-wise, we go out with the notice of election on the 1st of July, roughly, the 1st of July. So that's when we go out with, calling for nominations, saying when the voting day is and all that. So to include it in that, because that's the time that we would flag it to say that it's going to be on the voting document, then you'd have to be well and truly sorted by 1 July, meaning, I guess May, June, being a point where you're making a final decision. Bearing in mind that there's then a bit of work to do to pull together the information that would go in the voter pack, I guess in the candidate profile booklet, explaining what the question might be about and why you're asking it, and as Jeff said, what the implications are.
Yep.
So you factor that in, I think, you'd be wanting to make a decision end of May, early June, so that we've got time to get it all included. Does that make sense?
It does. And probably just the other thing I would be interested in thinking about as well, and again, coming from a perspective where in principle I'm in favour of asking the public about something like this. My potential concern around this election would be the fact that we do already have the 2 Māori ward referenda that are going out as well. I would be interested in some advice, whether that's now, whether it's around a council meeting where we're voting on this, on what the expert view is on the potential impact on turnout and engagement, basically as you add more and more questions in. So I know, for example, one of the arguments we used to say let's not do a vote around the Hatmana Charitable Trust anymore was it's one more thing to vote on, and voting fatigue. Because I think the point that you make, Mayor Baker, is a good one. If this drives up turnout, that's great. That will be a really good thing for engagement. But if it's the inverse and people go, oh God, there's a whole bunch of different referenda, I just don't want to engage in this. So I would be interested in what the sort of evidence shows around that as well.
I will take it back to the other mayors in the region. Obviously, it's failed before from the top down.
Yeah.
So I'm wanting to go from the bottom, start, see what it looks like. We've got to start somewhere, and I think Porirua can lead that. But that's me personally. So Tracy, then Mike, then Ross.
I'm very supportive of this going into the as a question through the election process. I think we owe it to our ratepayers to ask them what they think. There's lots of discussion around the city, and to put it out there and be direct is good. And I like that we're being courageous and bringing it forward. I really agree with Josh that if we can do it in partnership with other councils who are also involved, that gives it stronger credibility and some value as well. And I think given our low engagement rate, we've got nothing to lose by experimenting with running it at this time. So, yeah, I think my initial thought is it's a good idea.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I support the idea too. Excuse me. There is nowhere there that says why we're doing it, though. It's economies of scale we're talking about. Surely we should preface it with the fact that to get the benefits of those economies of scale, we move into this. Otherwise, it just
But
says...
then you're having to prove that, and we don't want to do all that work. So that's like going down another rabbit hole. It's why would you do the work if people don't agree?
Yeah, but why would they agree? Just to merge the councils and keep separate? I mean,
Well,
doesn't make...
we know it's worked in other areas, but you don't. How much money do you want to spend? So you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And this has been around the mural for all time for the last 3 years. And you've heard all government, both sides of government saying, you guys, little councils don't work, the larger ones work together, you get more money and things do come down. But that, if we did that, the cost of that would be horrendous. So it's like, yeah, I know it's cart before the horse, Mike.
Yeah.
We are asking to explore the situation.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're asking the residents.
So was your question, was that you're for the question or you're not? Because I don't want to take it to, I don't want to do any paper if there's
I'm
no
for
point. Okay, thank you. Ross?
Look, I'm absolutely for it as well. I note what other people have said, Josh and Co. There, I mean, good points, but I think we should throw it out there. I don't believe, well, I think it's as Anita has alluded to, these things have been talked about with councils and mayors and others over the years. Nobody ever does anything. I suspect if we try and get an agreement about putting it in all councils, it'll just end up
Nowhere.
with a brick wall. Nowhere. Nobody will ever agree on the wording or whatever. You know, the sorts of points that Mike raised will be, you know, they'll be raised, and that'll be a reason not to do it. So I think people do innately understand about these sorts of things, and they are talking and thinking about it. So I think it would be a good idea just to get a feel for where the community is at.
Kylie?
Thank goodness there's no capital S, capital C written in there anywhere. You know, all know what words I'm talking about. You were talking about voter fatigue, and I think that once every 3 years would be the best opportunity to get our community to vote. I just don't want this, though, to appear on marketing or whatever to override the Māori role poll. I think I agree with the question, and I think we should do it, but it should kind of be not the main, what do you call it?
Yes.
Yeah, the main focus. Sorry, the main focus.
No, I don't disagree
if
with
that
you.
makes. But yes, I do support it.
Thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, I also support it. I think it's a point that gets raised whenever you start talking about the rates or council's function. You know, our region, depending on what encompasses any kind of amalgamation, is smaller than some cities in New Zealand and smaller than most cities around the world. So while we've got 5 councils, 5 CEOs, 5 chairs, 50,000 councillors, wannabes or not, standing, it's just, you know, it's a hot topic, and I think taking it to and adding it to the voting documents is the highest form of consultation with the voters and the ratepayers. You may not get, you may only get 40% of the people on the electoral roll voting or partaking, but that's still going to be far more than you get at a annual plan or long-term plan consultation. So yeah, I'm on board with this.
You. Izzy? She can't put a camera on, guys, because she's got a migraine, but she wants to participate. You have to unmute, Izzy. No, you've gone back to mute. I know you're struggling to see. Still on mute.
What is he talking? Can I say something, please?
She's just got herself off mute. There you go, Izzy. You're away. Then Mose. Oh, no, she's back. Try talking now, Izzy. You've got connection issues, Izzy. We'll go to Mose.
I think I'm all for trying to boost the numbers. I think what I'm mindful of is potentially, are we gonna like lose? I guess a unique Porirua take from opening it to a whole region, or I want to see how it works out. Really, I'm open to putting it out. I just want to hear more about what it looks like. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, we haven't even thought about that. It's the question for the residents to think. Yeah. Totally,
cool.
totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Izzy, you want to try again? Yeah, I'll text her again. Kathleen.
Yeah, I think I didn't expect this to come through today. So just listening to what everybody's saying, I share similar concerns about it sort of affecting potentially the polls, or going off the back of the Māori poll, the Māori ward poll. I definitely think there's more to iron out. In terms of what Councillor Waddle said around consultation, that's a fair point. I guess the difference, there's something to consider though, will be that with consultation documents, usually there's quite a bit of info that goes with it to kind of inform people about what they're being asked about. So I definitely think there's more that needs to be considered and looked at, but it's a good question to ask, and if we can justify the cost and it outweighs, the benefit, then I'm open to looking at it further.
Okay, thank you all. I think that means it will come to the council for a decision. Yes, it will. Aziz says her microphone is not working either. So, yeah, and we need to represent the views of the people. So the only way we can do that is to hear from them. Okay, thank you very much.